This is Alex Koldovsky. I have a very special guest on our podcast, Keith Robinson, who is the Chief Strategic Officer of NextHome Inc. NextHome works with over 6,500 agents under the franchise umbrella of NextHome. He develops and oversees the implementation of key strategic business relationships, including my companies too. Before joining NextHome, Keith operated Prosper Marketing as a Chief Strategic Officer. Before that, he was the CEO of Better Homes. I think everybody knows Better Homes.
Yep.
Gardens, Mason, McDuffie Real Estates, the 19th largest real estate company, overseeing 35 offices, 1,300 realtors. Now, taking a step back, we met at the IMN AI conference in New York.
That's right.
We clicked right away and was pretty impressed. I think
Same.
we stood apart from everybody else on that conference because we were both technical.
Yeah.
We both understand AI, and I think Keith, you played around with bots, so that's pretty cool. And we're down to the point, and we probably understand each other quite well. And we don't typically talk about water; we talk specifics.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what I think attracted both of us to each other, and we're friends. And I can probably call Keith, and Keith can call me anytime.
Absolutely.
So Keith, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's an honor to be on your show. Thanks for having me. And I agree that it was interesting being at an early AI conference, right? Where there was people ran the gamut. There were guys like you and I who've, you've been in it deeper even than I have, and I've been flirting with the edges. And then there were people who all they knew was the two letters, and that was it. So it was an interesting experience for sure.
Yeah, we'll certainly talk about it on our podcast, but I agree with you. Not a lot of people understand what AI is.
Yeah.
The AI for them is something that is more Gen AI, and there's so many other things related to it.
Totally.
But a lot of people are very excited about it. They talk about governing AI or ethics in AI without understanding the guts, what it is. So
Right.
it's pretty funny to watch, but I'm glad we both understand, all the details on what's involved to develop and how to operate. And sometimes AI is a very precise, engineering models of what to do with things, either building LLMs on the specs or building the machine learning models. It's nothing new than it was before, say 10 years ago, except now there's better technology, faster, cheaper, and people are scared.
It just is all, the tech finally caught up with the idea, right? Yeah.
So we'll touch on that.
Sure.
So I'm not leaving that topic.
All right. Fire away.
Let's start with let's fire away at the overall real estate market, right? So here's what I see. Keith, agree or you have better understanding than me?
No, go ahead.
Specifically to market overview, sales volume. I feel that a lot of agents are unemployed or can't make a sale because of the high interest rates. And it's a struggling market, right? So the purchase and sales and investor market really dried up, and I feel that a lot of people are suffering. So
yes,
am I right? And tell me more. How do you see the market? Right.
You're right. We've had really 3 years, but for sure 2 of significantly lower than normal transaction volume. Now, we also had a couple of years of significantly higher than normal transaction volume, right? So we can't forget about those components as part of the overall thought process. But yeah, it's hard out there. Really, this sort of lock-in effect that people have been talking about is real. It's true. While it is true, I believe at the core, people buy because of timing in their life, not timing in the market. But affordability is still an issue. And we've exacerbated that issue over the last 3 years by having a pretty steep incline in property values and an incredibly historic steep incline in interest rates, right? So affordability was an issue prior to those two things happening. Then we had a great 3 years from an appreciation standpoint, starting to cool off, even some markets starting to retrench. Some of the markets that really experienced the explosive growth over the last 3 years are starting to see some of that recede. But in general, from a macro standpoint, we've never had 26 years residential real estate leadership. We've never had a market where the cost to borrow money changed at the rate at which it changed over the last few years. And that has caused buyers to back away. We're really used to that. We're very used to interest rates go up, buyers back away. What we haven't seen, and it's just because we've never seen the pace of change, is also to sellers backing away, where they want to trade up. The life event that would normally trigger that transaction has happened, but they go to run the numbers, and because the down leg property is at one interest rate and the up leg property, in most instances, not all, but in most, more expensive. So that more expensive property at the higher interest rate is just untenable for the seller to make that transaction. So they've had the life event that normally would dictate a transaction, but they can't afford it. So they end up staying where they are. So we've got this sort of lock-in effect where both buyers and sellers for the last 2 years have been backing away from making that decision to transact in residential real estate. So to forward look a little bit, rates have gotten better, sort of. Fed did the rate cut. I think we're going to talk. That's a question that you've got. We'll talk about that later. But rates have been trending down over the last several months. That's starting to unlock some of what's going on. It's a step in the right direction. We need that to continue. And then, if you want me to forecast 2025, I think 2025 is going to be a great year for residential real estate. I think the agents who are going through this pain and experiencing what they're experiencing right now will have a really good opportunity, because we've never had the hard that we've had for the last several years, but we've also never had the experience that we're about to have when rates normalize, because we've never had a situation to the downside where sellers backed away because they couldn't afford it. But we've also never had a situation where every 0.5% or 1% interest rate move unlocks some percentage of sellers. We're used to that unlocking buyers. We've never had an instance where it also unlocks sellers. So you're going to get this exponential amplification effect when rates normalize.
Is that what your message to the agents is? I mean,
Yeah.
right now, everybody's in pain. You have 6,500 people crying to your shoulder and saying, Keith, we can't sell. I mean, the market is dead. It's locked. Sellers don't sell. Buyers can't afford it. What do you recommend us do? What is
Yeah.
the strategy that you can recommend for them to go and say, well, you can try this?
Yeah. So great question. There's a twofold approach here. One is just survive, right? I know that's not a sexy thing to say into a microphone and to your billions of adoring fans across the globe, right? But there is a component of this. Sometimes, look, real estate is cyclical, and in the upturns, we get to, have all the success that comes with that. And in the downturns, we just have to endure, right? So some of the conversations that I've been having for several years now and continue to have is you have to intelligently, with a scalpel, not with a hatchet, but you have to intelligently manage your expenses. That doesn't mean cut your marketing budget. You need actually to consider increasing your marketing budget, because you need to do more to get the same amount, right? You've got to work harder and do more to do the same number of deals that you've done in the previous years. That's just the reality. There's fewer transactions in the marketplace today. So there's a certain component that's just survive. Okay, fine. Let's set that aside. Now, but as far as actionable items, look, there's not a script or dialogue or a conversation that gets someone who isn't ready to sell their home. If that existed, I would just teach all my franchisees that, and we'd be the number one company in the world. And right, it's just not how it works. So what you have to do is really, really optimize, and don't let anything slip through the net of your current business and structure. That means leaning into your sphere of influence. I'm not going to give you some revolutionary tool or tip or trick here. It's fundamentals, executing really, really well. Right now, specifically, what I'm talking to my people about is 2025 started 2 weeks ago. Rates have had some downward pressure, not lately. They've actually had a little upward pressure lately. But in general, if you look at the 6-month trend line, rates are trending down. I believe that trend will continue. As that continues, what I'm worried about for agents is the market is starting to heat back up. The indicators that we need and the things that we need to start to thaw this market are happening right now at a time when the industry is at peak distraction. So much of the industry is worried about the commission lawsuits, about the settlement, about how to do the buyer rep agreement and talk about the buyer rep and all of these other things. The holidays are coming, and yeah, how am I going to get Christmas price? Like, they're worried about all this other stuff except their core business. And so what I would say is, now is the time. Like, call a family meeting and tell them, look, Christmas isn't canceled, but you know how usually this is the time where I spend a little more time with family. This year, I'm working, right? These next 90 days could really determine your next 36 months in residential real estate. And I believe that very deeply. The agents, the offices, the companies that really lock in and get a hyper focus on, okay, nothing revolutionary. Let me just stick to my knitting. Is my sphere of influence marketing plan what it should be? Is my lead follow-up methodology what it should be? Let me get everything in my business optimized, and let me replug in and refocus, because as things get better, the wave is building. Doesn't feel like it yet because it's just starting to build, but the wave is building, and the agents who are already paddling to catch the wave are going to be the ones that get their unfair share on the other side.
Yeah, and then I piggyback to what you said. I think the term of wave, right?
Yeah.
If you break it by a market segment, so you have
Mm-hmm.
the first-time home buyers
Yep.
that is not pulling the trigger right now, and it's continuously accumulating to that bubble. When the time is right, it'll flood the market with people trying to find deals on the first-time home buyers. The supposedly recession is coming, right? And
Right.
and there's
Maybe.
some sense, maybe some sense of a maybe a little feel, or are we in recession right now? Is recession coming in 2025? It's a good thing, by the way. I think
Right.
it'll have to flush through all the things that are sort of accumulated post COVID to go through things that, you know, uh, folks that can't afford a house, they should
Yeah.
not own the house. Um, Folks that, the law firms and the lenders that try to file the foreclosures, they couldn't because of the loss meet measures. So now they can. So that
Yeah.
has to work out. Uh, then you have probably investors that over leverage themselves,
Right.
right? Where they have to dump a lot of inventory. So there's a lot of, call it a wave is accumulating and waiting for something. Either it's a rate drop
Mm-hmm.
or an election
Mm-hmm.
or some political change. And, how do you view the wave segmentation,
Yeah.
right? And how does it translate to your advice to your agents?
Yeah. We'll go macro first.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an oversimplification to say we just need interest rates to go down and everything will be fine, right? But kind of, we just need interest rates to go down and everything will be fine. So, like, there's a lot of stuff that goes into how do we get interest rates to go down, right? So I don't want to root for recession. That feels kind of icky, right? But maybe a nice little soft, kind of little gentle, sort of nothing catastrophic recession would be perfect, because recessions tend to put downward pressure on rates. The Fed will start cutting more aggressively because they want to stimulate the economy. When they do that, that puts downward pressure on interest rates and downward pressure on the spread, which will start this unlocking that we've been talking about. And then I also think no two recessions are the same, right? Real estate has been in a recession for almost 3 years now, so my industry has been in a recession. I'm ready to get out of it. There's other industries, AI. If you're selling chips, you've had a great 3 years, right? So I do think we have sort of this, what I'll call a rolling recession, which I read somewhere and I'd never heard before, but I stole it. And it's kind of a made up thing. Like, a real economist would laugh at me, but it seems more like, versus the classic recessions that we've seen historically, which is sort of an impact of the overall economy. It seems like it's rolling from sector to sector, which, if you think about it, sort of makes sense post COVID, right? When you shut everything down and then you turn everything back on, it's not a light switch. It's more like water moving through a pipe, right? So just because you turn it back on, all the lights don't come on in every industry all at the same time. Though it's been moving through the various industries, and real estate was getting its face caved in. And now real estate's going to start to get better. And you're going to see, some of these other industries start to enter into some recessionary type cycles. And that's, I think anyway, why we're getting some of this. You're still setting historic highs in the stock market at a time when interest rates and the pace and change in interest rates are what they are. So that's a component that I think is moving through what the reality is for a residential real estate professional. But the key right now is to just, there's a lot of debate, recession, no recession, who knows, right? But I don't talk to anyone, with the exception of a few people, that think that there's going to be upward pressure on rates going into 2025. That's a very rare, or a couple of use cases in which I could paint that picture, but most likely that's not what's going to happen going into 2025 and 2026. And so because right now rates are still, the Fed rate is it's not like it's at normal. It's not close to normal, right? So there's a lot of room to move in the Fed rate. So I think that's one component. We have had a recession, but it's been sector wide, not economy wide. So I think we're just going to continue to see that. And if it can get a little more broad based in a slowdown, that would be ideal, because then the Fed is going to feel more comfortable in being more restrictive around rate policy, which puts downward pressure on rates and sort of stimulate what we need, which is getting some of this affordability issue solved.
And those few people that you mentioned that are thinking that the rates will go up are probably afraid of the reverse market crash, which makes real estate market unaffordable for first-time home buyers. Why? Because the rates go to zero. It's free money. We invest in stock market. It blows up. It doubles. People that are in the stock market get richer, and they buy more expensive homes and drag the whole industry behind them. So I do see that point as well. And it's the point of inflation, right? So it's
correct. It's really inflation, right? Like, so the Fed, this is just, look, the views being expressed, the views of Keith Robinson, not Alex or his company or my company, right? If anybody's pissed off, go ahead. You can shoot me an email. I don't mind. I piss people off every day, right? But the Fed, in my opinion, is just over indexed for inflation, right? Like, inflation is down, but we get some of these reports where it's not, maybe it looks like it could be going back up, or, I mean, there's a different thesis. I think the 2% inflation target is just the wrong target. I don't think we're in a 2% inflation target world anymore. I think it's closer to 3, maybe even 3.5. And so if you're aiming at 2, in the real life, the physics of the economy is that inflation is going to run at 3 to 3.5, because we're not globalizing anymore. We're not optimizing we're not building something where it's the cheapest to build it and then taking it to where people are going to buy it, right? We're onshoring more, all those things, right? So there's inflationary things that are out there that if the Fed gets nervous about inflation, then they aren't going to cut as quickly. If they don't cut as quickly, that could be something that slows down the residential real estate recovery, right? And so it's the biggest problem we have. This isn't, I mean, we could go on and on about this for hours, but I mean, if you want to look at the debt problem in the U.S., that's the biggest problem we have staring us in the face right now. And then I just don't, just to be honest, I'm not an economist, but I'm an economics nerd. I don't understand the U.S. consumer right now. Like, they are on a heater. Like, I don't know where all the money's coming from. Credit card debt's at an all-time high, savings at an all-time low. Yes, everyone has jobs and is making a little more money, but inflation has exceeded the pace of growth in wage growth. So, like, but everybody still seems like they're still rich as hell and going to spend money like, YOLO, right? And so at some point, the U.S. consumer has to tap out. I don't know when that is, but at some point, the U.S. consumer has to tap out. When that happens, that's when you'll really start to see the slowdown. When you really start to see the slowdown is when I think we'll get accelerated downward pressure on rates, which starts to unlock everything for the industry that I care about, which is residential real estate.
Yeah, very good point. Just to wrap up the market, there's 2 things that I wanted to ask you. Since you have the agents nationwide, you kind of get a feel on the statewide, geographical wide momentum. And there's 2 things that I wanted to touch on. First is, as things get more expensive in Florida,
Hmm.
or other places like California,
Hmm.
it's a forced purchase, a forced sale, right? Where it's too expensive to live there. Level of living is too high, and therefore I decide to move from Florida to Tennessee or Georgia. So
Hmm.
there's a rotation of folks that are really squeezed by the inflation and high, appreciation of everything that's around them to lower cost areas.
Right.
So that's part one of a question. Part two is uh, international investor investments,
Yep.
right? So when folks that realize that investing in U.S. real estate is a hedge
Yep.
for them living outside of U.S. Say China would be parking money in U.S. because it's safer, or India, or or the other way around, right? In
Sure.
fact, India just appreciated 3x
Yeah.
on some of the things in 2 years. It's phenomenal growth. Um, but do you see any international investment changes
Hmm.
as a part two of the question?
Okay. So one was demographic, domestic migration, right? So
Yeah,
I think, yes, California, where I live, we will continue to drive people out of our state and into your state, wherever you might be listening. And you can count on that because we're lunatics out here, right? But so in general, what we've seen over the last 3 years is really an amplification of what you were just talking about. So people were moving from the high cost areas. So think Northeast and West Coast, and those dollars were sort of moving out of, like, it's too expensive in Boston, it's too expensive in New York, it's too expensive in Washington D.C., it's too expensive in San Francisco, it's too expensive in LA, it's getting too expensive in San Diego, right? So that's where you see these markets like Idaho, Arizona, Texas, Florida, especially the Southeast. There's been a tremendous migration because of two things, really, I guess. Sort of a quality of life thing, right? COVID sort of recalibrated everyone for a quality of life thing, and then affordability. But if you're forecasting, look, anything that goes up too fast, you can use nature as an example. So if a tree grows too fast, it doesn't develop the root system that it needs. Because it doesn't develop the root system that it needs, any kind of hard breeze is going to push that tree over, right? So think about markets like they're just sort of natural things, and anything that's had explosive growth for the last 3 years is going to retrench. It has to. It not only, and I know we freak out, like, there's markets in Florida that are starting to see downward pressure on average, on average sales price, and that's appropriate. You've had 15% gains you're up 30-40% over the last 3 years. Like, it retrenching by 6% over the next 12 months, or even 10% over the next 24 or 36, that's actually healthy. If a market just always goes up and to the right parabolic, then the fall is even worse. So any area where you've had explosive growth, yeah, you're going to have some retrenchment there. So that's why you're starting to see some of this. Okay, it was Northeast into Florida. Florida got so expensive. Some of those folks are like, I got to get out of here. And then they're moving to Tennessee and to Georgia. And so you'll see this sort of movement. But real estate still is more illiquid, right? People aren't just, if you have a great job and you love where you live, you're not trying to, like, in general, most people aren't like, well, forget it. Let's get out. I love the Florida coast, but let's get out of here and go to the Georgia pines, right? Um, it isn't going to happen in mass, but it does start to happen. And anything that goes up a lot needs to have a slowdown or a leveling period to sort of recalibrate to the changes. So, um, I think that trend will continue, a migration towards affordability from a macro standpoint. What that will mean is hyperlocal. As you know, all real estate is hyperlocal. So there are still going to be some parts of Florida that are probably undervalued and will continue to appreciate. And there are definitely some parts of Florida that are probably overvalued because you've had so many people move there so fast and put upward pressure on price. So from a domestic standpoint, that's sort of my thoughts. From a foreign investment, this gets tossed around in a lot of the financial blogs. The U.S., while it has some issues, is still the cleanest dirty shirt, right? It is still the safest place to park your money. And are there threats to that? Of course. Are there things people are worried about? Yes. But so long as the U.S. dollar is sort of the world's trade, it's the world's currency for trade, right? So long as that continues, and I know there are threats, and we talk about the BRICS and everything else, fine. But like for now, it is still the world is dollar dominant. So long as that stays, then this is still going to be where people want to park their money. Are there going to be fewer dollars coming from China? Yeah, because there's fewer dollars being created in China because they're in the midst of a recession. So yes, foreign investment will be down. China investment will be down. India will probably be up. If you just look at the areas where there is growth, those are going to be the folks that are parking dollars here in the US. You look at the area where there isn't, well, they don't have the dollars to park in the US. So they won't be coming our direction. But I don't think there's not like I haven't seen anything that would indicate that there's this big, no one's, I won't pick on any other countries, right? But no one's like saying, let's not park it in the US, let's take it to pick some other country. We're still, for now, maybe not as good of a place as we were a decade ago to park your money, but still probably the best place to park your money today on the globe.
Using your logic,
Yeah.
we just came up with the 2 sales and marketing strategies for your agents.
Yeah.
Number 1, and again, while you're talking, my wheels are spinning.
Always.
And
I know you.
Always, yeah. First strategy would be, I want to find out who's getting squeezed in the area where the agent lives.
Yeah.
Let's say somebody has a credit card debt. It's typically a court files or public records filing.
Yep.
And if that person has a house, what I really want to do is I want to show up at their doorsteps and say, I can get you moved to different states with much cheaper affordability, and I can sell you a house and possibly do for the investors 1031 exchange.
Sure.
Or for you, you can trust me as an agent to get you down to a certain level. And with your network of real estate agents, you might have an agent that works with say from Florida, works with the Georgia or Tennessee agent. And now there's collaboration, and you can say, well, where do you want to live? Do you want to live in rural area, metro area? And now it becomes an interesting sales strategy where you really approach people to help them.
Right.
Even though the high rate environment, but still moving to a cheaper state would allow them to pay a little bit less than they pay right now in the less affordable states.
I agree with everything you said, with one add-on to it, which is, yes, I agree with everything you've said. For most agents, and I say this with love in my heart, they actually aren't doing a good enough job at just the basic marketing to their sphere of influence and to the people who already know them, trust them, and love them. So start there, right? Like, look at what you're doing today, and if on a scale of 1 to 10, it's not a 10, then fix that first, right? Don't optimize before, right? Like, if you're trying to lose weight, don't go run a marathon first, right? Go walk around the block for a month, right? And then go for a jog around right? You know what I'm saying? So yes, you can do lots of optimization strategies to increase your lead conversion. Totally agree. First thing to do is just get more leads coming in and then optimize. Yeah.
I completely agree with you. And again, our podcast is to generate ideas, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Folks will listen and say, oh, I wish I could do that, or how can I do that? Or
Yeah.
maybe I get in touch with Keith and figure things out. And the second point that I wanted to make, looking at the international markets, figure out which country is up, which means the economy is going up, people will earn more money. Let's say India. Where do they invest? Do they reinvest in India? Maybe. Do they invest in Dubai? Maybe. Maybe people in Dubai are saying, well, we just tripled in the cost of real estate in Dubai, and maybe now we want to park the money in the US because it's steady and it's not going to go down, right? So we, in essence, realize the gain. So those type of strategies, again, if you reached your maximum potential with the current marketing strategies, listen to this podcast and maybe you get ideas.
And the thing about to go back to that sort of domestic specific credit card debt, like the thing that I would really lean into is, I guess I would call it pre-foreclosure marketing, right? So what are the triggers that are and that feels a little icky, right? People don't love it, but here's the deal. To your point, number one, they need help, right? So, and then number two, this isn't going to be like 2008. So, equity is at an all-time high. So there is more equity in residential real estate than there has ever been in the history of the U.S. real estate market. So there's not going to be this huge foreclosure market. I just don't believe that. So the way I've been referring to it is we're not going to have distressed sales where it's short sales and foreclosures, but we are going to have stressed sales where there's people who maybe there's some job loss, maybe the credit card debt's gotten too burdensome. You take the weight on the shoulders of folks, and they just want a pressure relief valve, right? So they don't necessarily want to sell their house, but they're just so tired from the weight on their shoulders. And this asset has a bunch of illiquid cash in it, right? And so from an agent standpoint, it's who are those folks that are maybe starting to fall behind on their payments to what you mentioned? The credit card debt is ballooning. Use data to optimize how to communicate to those folks and do it in a really elegant way, not around like you are going to lose your house, right? Not the fear-based, but just wouldn't it feel great to get some of this pressure off your back?
There are ways to get it off your back, right? So
that's right.
People that have debt, they're lost, right? They're down to pretty much no way or no vision on how to get out.
Yep.
And for somebody to come in and offer, this is what we can do, and think outside of the box, not just I can sell your house.
Right, exactly. Yes.
But yeah, I can sell your house, and then we can consolidate the payments, and we can move you to a different state, and it's square footage to square footage, and all of a sudden you're current, right?
Or even, look, and I know I'm a real estate guy, and this may not be popular, and again, I don't really care that much, but like, go in and just advise them, right? The right answer for your client might be a cash out refinance, okay? And that doesn't make you any money. I understand that. But if you just show up and go talk to people about their residential real estate needs and serve them at the highest level and help them with whatever that means, even if it's referring them to your favorite lender so that they can find a solution, right? Let them explore that. And then they might discover, oh, damn, I can't afford those payments if I do a cash out refinance. Then they come back to you, and then you can talk about the strategy that you were just talking about. Maybe we move to Georgia. Here's what that could look like. But be their complete real estate resource. Be the person who just advises them on as a fiduciary on what's in their best interest, whether that means a transaction for you or not. You just have a bunch of those appointments every week. You will make so much money. You will not have to worry about anything ever again. So show up, stay in curiosity, be a real true fiduciary for them, and then shape it whatever direction they want to go. And many of those will be a monetization event for you, and some of them won't be, and that's okay.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
Completely agree. And I think it's a great segue to talk about NAR settlement.
Yes.
So, quick story. I gave Keith a call and I said, Keith, how about you and I do a podcast together? I respect you greatly and your opinion on real estate market and how you drive the business. And Keith said, can't talk to you. I am so busy with NAR settlement, with all the changes. How about after the summer is over, after this nightmare is over, we get in touch.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what is that nightmare? What things changed? How do people think about NAR settlement and the effect to real estate agents?
Okay. How you want me to like start at the beginning on this story or?
Sure. Just I guess what the settlement is about.
So just in case someone doesn't know, there was a class action lawsuit against the industry, basically saying that sellers, because the way you would normally negotiate commissions on your real estate transaction is the seller's agent would go meet with the human selling their home. They would negotiate the total commission structure, and then they would share that commission with the buyer's agent. The reason that was done way back when they started doing it is because the seller was the one with all the cash. They were the one with the equity normally. So they were the one who could afford to pay it. Worked pretty well, candidly. Don't think people were harmed. Don't agree with the results of the lawsuit, but the industry was sued, basically saying the seller was damaged because they didn't have the ability to negotiate with the buyer's agent in what they were paying. Okay, so that goes to court. The industry loses that lawsuit. NAR then says they're going to appeal. They start the appeals process. But in the end, NAR and others settle, basically saying, well, I'm not admitting that this is wrong, that it was wrong or that we had any wrongdoing, but sometimes in this great, beautiful country of ours, it is better to settle than to continue to fight. So NAR settles. The results of the settlement are now commissions are decoupled. What that means is a seller isn't precluded from offering a commission. It's still your home. If you want to offer a commission to a buyer's agent, you can, but it's not required. You cannot do it the way we used to do it, which is the one person going and then cooperating. It's cooperating with the other agent. So this meant now that every agent across the country, though there are many states that had buyer representation agreements in place, and that was the process, now every state in the U.S., you have to go have a separate agreement with the buyer and a separate agreement with the seller. Really, it's not wildly different. And I know it feels different to the industry, and I do understand that, but it isn't wildly different from how we used to do it. It's just more, I guess, even more transparent, and there's some new paperwork that you have to sign. Like, if you really think about it, but because it's new and because it's changed, and there are parts about it that don't make sense for the buyer, right? So the way that the settlement reads is now, Alex, if you wanted to see a property, in order for me to show you that property, we would have to have a signed buyer representation agreement. Okay. Not a huge deal if it's a normal, you were thinking about selling your house, you've decided to sell your house, you're going to be looking for your upleg house. We meet, we sign all the paperwork, pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Where it's tougher is we've all had clients who are walking home from the farmer's market and see a sign in the yard and they want to see the house, right? Just maybe because they're curious or they're nosy or they want to daydream. And this is the neighborhood they might want to move into when they can afford it, right? Or what do you do with an online lead? Someone who's never met you, they don't have any idea who you are, but I need you to sign a buyer representation agreement that says we're going to work together for 90 days or 6 months. And you don't know if you like me. I don't know if I like you. We certainly don't have a trust relationship, but now I've got to have you sign this before I can let you into the house, right? So we've just been working through all of that as an industry, like how to explain it to a buyer, how to structure it so that if there's no real relationship there, that buyer rep agreement should probably look different than if there's a deep relationship there. And I've sold you 6 homes and now I'm going to sell you your 7th, right? And if I'm an investor who only buys fix and flip, I'm not going to sign a committed agreement where I'll only work with you, an exclusive agreement. I'm going to sign a non-exclusive agreement. So as an industry, we've just been trying to work through how to approach it all just because it's all different. And there's 3-4 million real estate agents, licensed real estate, licensed carrying, licensed folks in the country. And all of them have had to learn some a little, some a lot in a new approach to how to do it. And getting that many people to learn anything is hard. And getting that many people to learn anything in a short period of time with a definitive deadline where every state has different paperwork. Every state's paperwork is some version of good to bad to great. And it's just a mess to work through all that. So the nightmare wasn't really the structural changes, because real estate agents are great at shepherding people through a stressful transaction. That's what they used to do. That's what they do today. That part hasn't changed. But getting that many people to learn new paperwork and new processes all at the same time, very, very difficult. And that's where a lot of the noise has been coming from inside the industry.
So let's cover the corner cases, because I'm curious myself.
Yeah.
So first, who enforces the irregularities of bad paperwork, no paperwork? Is that the state? Or that's
technically so the state makes the rules. Then it depends exactly where it breaks and what the rule is, but then either the local multiple listing association or the state association of real estate agents then will take those rules and make it fit for their state. then at the local area, your broker, the person who has the broker's license, has sort of day-to-day management responsibilities for the paperwork. And then there's some components where the MLS may be doing some auditing or enforcing of that as well. So, but for the most part, it falls to the local administration and to the broker owner operator, who it's their license that is sort of at risk if you're doing shenanigans.
So you have to be careful not to lose your license, and therefore you have to be compliant.
Yeah, and the
And
fines are, you look, because this is highly sensitive and because there was a lawsuit about it and because we lost it, you know, there are fines that will be associated with failing to comply, and the fines, from what I've seen, have been there's teeth to them. They're very, the industry is very worried about getting sued again and making mistakes in implementing this. So there is a fair amount of rigor. But do I think every agent across the U.S. is having a buyer rep agreement signed prior to showing a house? Probably not, right? Like, if someone's best friend wants to go see a house, they're probably just going to show them the house, right? If
right,
and they shouldn't. I'm not saying they should. And
there's a risk associated with
there's
that.
a
With
risk,
that,
right?
right?
If you're an investor and I'll buy a flip when you bring it to me. But in a perfect world, yes, people would be having these agreements signed ahead of time, and it's being enforced at the local level.
So does it seem like a speed dating with the agents? So if I'm a buyer,
Yeah.
right, and I say, well, I want to buy a house in the new area, and the agents are buying online advertising, they're all 5 stars, but I just don't know which one to pick. Let me
Hmm.
pick a 24-hour seller representation to go and drive around with that agent. And tomorrow I have another agent, and then I'm
Right.
speed dating him
Hmm.
until I find the one that I trust. Is that what it turns into?
No. I mean, some, yes. But the best way that I've been talking to people about this is think about buyers now the same way you used to think about a listing. Okay. So 70, I don't want to quote the percentage wrong. So I'll just say, mid 70% of people talk to one real estate agent. Okay. I think it's 74%. I haven't, the NAR publishes a stat every year, series of stats every year. So mid 70% of people talk to one real estate agent. That's been true for a long time. That number hasn't changed a lot, even with the explosion of information and all the portals and all the shenanigans. It's very, most people with a really big life decision, right? If use you as your specific example, no one wants to speed date 3 or 5 agents. Like, who wants to do that? Nobody. So if you knew you were moving to Danville, California, you would reach out to me and say, Keith, I'm moving to Danville, California. Who is a great agent? Right. And I'm going to say, I really love this one. And then I know you. And so I'll be like, well, that one, probably not enough of a data nerd for you. I actually think you'd work better with this one. Right. And that's probably who you're going to talk to. And so long as they do a good job, which most of them do, that's probably who you're going to work with. So that's 3/4 of the marketplace, say. Will there be some downward pressure on that? Probably. If it's a go from 70% to 17, no. It's going to go from 76, 74 to 70, right? That's still 3/4 of the market basically working by repeat or referral, because it's a huge decision in which trust is really important and trust is transferable. So if I trust you and you tell me someone's good, I believe you, right? And so that will still be the case for a lot. But yes, in the past, that remaining, call it 25, 26%, used to go talk to one agent. That's probably who they work with. The new modality will be, they're going to talk to 3. And you better be leveling up your buyer consultation. You better get damn good at talking to buyers in a way that you haven't in the past. Your buyer consultation of today should look a lot like your listing presentation of today, where you're building rapport, you're showing your value, and then you're, explaining how you get paid, and they've got to sign something that says that. But it's not like 100% of the marketplace went from going repeat and referral, and now they're just going to be like, yeah, cool, great, now I want a speed date. Not at scale. Not at scale.
So that's whoever listens to our podcast really needs to up their game
Yeah.
if you're an agent, because buyers can play this game, right?
Yeah.
And you really want to log them in, make sure that you communicate all the key points correctly. You do it in a way where they will only choose you and not go somewhere else.
There's really, I've been saying this to my company, really to anyone who will listen. There's three key skills you need in this new environment for working with buyers. Number one is, unless you're in a buyer rep state, so there are some, but if you've got to get really good at having a conversation around the paperwork for the buyer rep agreement, right? How to have that conversation, get really good at it, practice it, get good at having that conversation with clients. So first thing, comfortable with the buyer rep agreement. Second thing, you got to level up your buyer consultation. It should, historically, it's been just the rapport building. You get together, you talk to them about who you are and how you work, you make a love connection, then you start showing them houses, and then eventually they land on one, you write an offer, right? Like that's how it's been. Now it's got to be not just the rapport building, but your buyer consultation. You now have got to show them how you're different, show your value, and then ask them to sign something. So there's two new components that you got to get really good at if you want to be successful. And then the third piece, so number one is buyer rep agreement. Number two is your buyer consultation. Number three is leveling up your negotiation skills. So negotiation's always been important, but right now it's peak insanity, right? You've got to negotiate with your seller if you're working sellers. You've got to negotiate with your buyer now because they're going to sign something that says how much they're going to pay you. There's a bunch of agents that don't even understand exactly what's going on, and a bunch of listing agents that are like saying, my seller doesn't want to pay anything, and you got to negotiate that. So negotiation has gone from important to paramount. And so leveling up your negotiation skills, my favorite book on that for real estate, anyway, is Getting to Yes. I forget the author. It's around here in my office somewhere, but Getting to Yes is, great book on it. I think Never Split the Difference is probably a better book on negotiations in general, but for real estate agents, Getting to Yes is probably the best because it's more of a co-opetition environment than a straight, competition environment.
Yeah, very good point. We only have a few minutes left, so I wanted to do sort of a quick
speed
Q&A
round.
Speed round, right?
Go.
So let's start with the one that I'm the most interested in.
Mm-hmm.
So Housing Wire posted the survey today, which is 16th of October when we're recording this, on the elections, right?
Yes.
Who is better for real estate market or agents?
Good question.
Trump or Harris, right? Who is better based on their policies that we know today, right? Based on what they put forth. So what's your opinion on that?
Okay, first of all, shout out to Clayton and his team at Housing Wire. If you aren't following them, you should be. I love those guys. Great news source for residential real estate. Okay, now, all right. First of all, I'm not a political person. I really think the country should just maybe take 4 years and find ourselves, and let's go with no president for 4 years and see what happens. Can't be worse than what we've been doing. But that's just my opinion. So, okay, back to specific. Well, let's just be honest. Neither one of them have a housing policy. They don't. They've floated out some ideas in and around housing. Okay. But I don't believe either one of them, and I wish this weren't true, but I don't believe either candidate will make housing important until they believe it will cost them votes. And I don't think we're there yet. I think there has to be a bigger hue and cry and screaming and wailing from us as a populace about the affordability issues in and around and pertaining to residential real estate. Unless politicians don't think will get reelected, they don't solve it. So unless it's something that will stop them from being elected, and there's too many ways for them to sort of dodge the bullets like the Matrix. Like, I can't control interest rates. That's not right. So I don't. There are some interesting things that I've read about in this. Oh boy, I'm definitely gonna get in trouble now. But I've read some things that would say that Trump could actually be more inflationary for things, and but I don't necessarily even believe that that's true. I think both candidates have shown that they aren't going to do anything to curtail spending, that they both will be inflationary in how they approach it. We got to get the deficit in line. I don't think either one of these candidates are the ones to do that. You need a consensus building president that's really going to go, office to office and get everyone on the same page in order to make some of the really hard decisions we have to make around Social Security and these, the defense budget and these other things that are part of why we are having these inflationary issues and these inflationary concerns. So I guess my answer, and it's a little bit of a dodge, but not really, because it's truly how I feel, is D, none of the above. I just don't think either of these candidates are great for residential real estate. I guess forced to pick, I would say I think Trump and his tax plan has put more money in people's pockets. And when people have money in their pockets, even though inflation could be an issue, they feel rich. And when people feel like they've got a little more jingle in their jangle, they tend to buy more houses. So, I guess if I have to pick one, but candidly, if I was standing in the booth today, I'd probably do a write-in ballot, because I don't think either one of these candidates are great specifically for residential real estate.
What was the movie Vote for Nobody?
Yeah.
Vote for No One, right? And
Yeah.
the person won. Was it Eddie Murphy's movie? I don't remember.
I don't. I remember the movie, but I don't. I remember the context, but I don't remember the movie.
Yeah, and he got elected. All right, let's touch on AI real quick.
Yeah.
So, my one of my companies is an AI company.
Yep.
Where do you see AI today? Do you deploy it in NextHome?
Yep.
Are we just scratching the surface, or we're full deployment? AI is there, making money and making things more efficient.
Okay, so AI from a macro standpoint, I think it's over indexed. I think too many dollars have flowed towards AI, and there's just people just heaving cash. Not as much now, but for the last 2 years, people have just been hurling cash at anything that has AI in its title, right? Like there's not a pitch deck in the world that doesn't have 4 to 5 slides that say AI on it right now, just because you're going to get more cash if you say that. So yeah. I think there's pain to be found in the AI space over the next, say, 12 to 24 months. But that's just because there's been so many hype cycles that haven't been anything. And this is a hype cycle that's going to be something. I think almost everyone agrees with that. And so people are just, fired up and excited and hurling money at it. So it's been over invested in for the last 24 months. But so there's some pain in the AI space, but not for us, not for you, not for me. I think AI is real. I think it's not just a hype cycle. I think that 3 to 5 years from now, it's really already touching people in ways that they don't even know or understand, right? Like technically, when you go to type an email and it's trying to guess, if you put to whom in your email right now, it's going to autofill with it may concern, right? Well, that's technically AI, right? Like that is a language learning model that's predictive of what you want and what you need in the moment. So I don't think, then the other piece, I know I'm a little all over the place right now. So, but I believe AI is overinvested in. I think there's going to be some pain there. I do think AI is real and it's going to be here for a long time. I don't think we're as close as other people do to this sort of general intelligence, right? And we got to first start, we got to actually get a handle on how we're talking about AI first, because I think when one person says AI, not everybody means the same thing, right? When someone says AI, some people mean artificial general intelligence, that sort of the assistant in your pocket that does everything for you, that knows what you need before you need it, and it, sends you smiley emojis because it knows your heart rate's different because you're having a bad day or whatever, right? We're not close to that yet, in my opinion. But what we have now, it's here right now, is sort of what I refer to as a tool-based AI, right? So you can build AI bots today to solve very specific problems, especially if it's in a what I'll call a text, not text messaging, but in a text-based environment, right? Voice is getting close. It's not quite there yet, but we're researching building a support bot for our company. We do first line support for all of our core questions. The number one question we get inside of our company is, what's my login and password, right? Out of the top 20 questions, probably 15 to 17 could be answered efficiently, effectively, faster. And I won't say better. My team does an amazing job, but other than better, AI could handle all of that. And what I'm excited about is not like, oh, great. Now that I got this AI, I could cut 2 heads. That's not how I'm thinking about this at all. I'm thinking about it from the standpoint, I've got this great customer service team, and I can free up 70% of their time to now go proactively reach out to my top agents, to my top offices, to give them an even better experience so that my retention goes up, so that my everyone re-signs, so that all of the components, these other key business measures, I've got this great talent pool that I can now free up because 50, 60, 70% of their time, AI can take care of that and give my people a comparable experience. And now I've got this talent base that I can go, oh, this should be fun. I'm the chief strategy officer. I should be thinking about strategy. What could I do with this talented group of humans to make my company better that AI can't do yet, right? And just keep using AI to lever off, I don't want to say the unimportant, but lever off what they can, right? And then use the human to go do the things that it can't yet. And so long as you keep iterating that way, eventually we will get to artificial general intelligence, and we will have our best friend in our pocket that can do all the things for us. But until we get there, just solve one small problem within your company with an AI bot, and whatever, and do it in a safe way that doesn't touch your whole company, some little, side part of your business. Build an AI, but just go play with it and try it. You'll see. I promise you, if you try to build an AI bot within 6 weeks, you will have an experience that, like, damn, okay, I can see what this is now. And there are some interesting, here's what it can do well, here's what it can't do well, and here's how I think I can make an impact in my business. But I think it's AI tools are here right now. Artificial general intelligence, we're not there yet.
Yeah, I completely agree with all the points you mentioned. I would call it AI applied
Yeah.
to solve a pain. Right?
Yeah.
If you don't
Yeah.
have a pain and you have a generic model, I don't know how you make money. If you make
Right.
music out of AI, it's a freeware, right? So
Yeah.
40,000 startups started with AI this year on the DAX, as you mentioned, and it's used to be, do I have a website? Yes,
Right.
here's $1 million, right?
Yeah.
Do I have a AI? Yes, here's the money. Well, AI by itself does nothing. It has to be
Correct.
applied to something, right? And if you have a pain, there's probably a bot or a software you can build to solve for that pain, and therefore you can do something fun and creative with your job instead of a mundane stare and compare or taking the paper from here to there.
Right.
Absolutely right. So
Yeah.
I'm completely with you and 100% in agreement.
Yeah.
I know we run out of time, so I wanted
Okay.
to just ask you real
Mm-hmm.
quick, for agents that view this podcast, how do they get in touch? How do they sign up? What do they need to know to become a part of the NextHome family?
Oh, well, I'll give 2 ways. One, I do have a podcast called The Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered. That's a great way. If you think I'm stupid and you want to hear more stupid things from me, then you could listen there. Or if you think I'm really smart, you could go listen for the smart things that I say. I don't really care either way. Just listen. So Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered Pod is a good place to find me. I'll give my email address. I don't care. Keith@nexthome.com. If you're interested in NextHome or just want to tell me I'm a genius or an idiot, it's Keith@nexthome.com. You can also follow me on Instagram. That's another good place to track me down, or LinkedIn. Keith_Robinson on LinkedIn, and just do a Google search for Keith Robinson NextHome, and you'll see my LinkedIn. Those are probably the best.
All right, sounds good. Keith, I wanted to thank for your time. It was great
Yeah.
content. Guys, check out the podcast, check out LinkedIn and Instagram. Thanks,
I
everybody.
appreciate you, brother. It was always good to talk.
Absolutely. Same here.